Anthony Guignac was born into poverty in Colombia, but by the time he was a grown man, he had some of the most powerful people on earth convinced that he was one of the wealthiest people on the planet. He was adopted at age 6 to a Michigan family, and one day he decided to walk into a Mercedes dealership dressed as a Saudi prince. And he walked out with a brand new Mercedes. He ended up convincing American Express to give him a card with a $200 million limit. And he even got the owner of the Fontainebleau Hotel to give him 50 grand in jewelry and rode him around on his private jet. He had the robes, he had the jewelry, he had the confidence, and he looked exactly like royalty. But at the end of the day, he was just a thief wearing a turban. He had the appearance of authority, but he had none of the substance. There wasn't anything really there. He was a guy kind of climbing in through the window because he didn't have the key to walk in the front door. And what finally tripped him up, it wasn't like a bank error. You know, nobody actually looked at his account and saw he was broke. No, it was dinner. He ordered a pork chop at a restaurant. Now, I'm no expert on the Quran, but I'm pretty sure a devout Muslim does not dig on swine. And that's what tripped him up. That one slip up, it revealed that he didn't actually have the authority or the resources that he claimed he had. He was a fraud. And that's exactly the kind of person that Jesus is talking about in John chapter 10. So fire up your little ESV Bible app. Grab the Bible in front of you. If you don't have a Bible, take one of those blue Bibles. That is our gift to you. And we're going to begin reading John chapter 10. Hear the words of Jesus. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. Now, I don't know how many sheep farmers we have out here. None? Okay, so let me explain a little bit about the context, because as we know, the Bible was written for us. It wasn't necessarily written to us. It was written to an audience that understands the sheep farming culture. So to understand what Jesus is talking about, we got to look at how shepherding was actually designed to work back in the culture 2,000 years ago in the ancient Near East. So a typical village in Israel, they didn't have individual fenced-in yards. You know, we all got our yards with our fence and our deck in the back and maybe a porch in the front. It wasn't like that. They had this collective sheepfold, and it was communal. This big stone courtyard with high walls and one single opening. And at night, multiple shepherds would bring their flocks in from the fields into the fold for protection. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. So they would leave the sheep under the watch of a gatekeeper or like a porter, right? The shepherds would go home, they would get some sleep, and then come back in the morning. And when the shepherd returned, the gatekeeper would open the door only to the guy that he recognized, the one who actually has a right to be there to get those sheep. And now picture what the gatekeeper's night looked like. He's sitting by the only entrance, and he's responsible for all the sheep inside that belong to multiple people. And every now and then, maybe once a week, maybe once a month, someone tries to climb over the side. Climb over that wall. Not through the door, over the side. And the gatekeeper, he sees it happen. He watches the guy scrambling up the stone, hiding in the dark, trying not to make any noise, trying not to get caught. His fingers are scratching against the rock. He's breathing hard. He's looking over his shoulder. The gatekeeper knows exactly what that looks like. This look of desperation. It looks like someone who knows he has no right being in there by the sheep. And the guy is not there for his own benefit. He's there for the sheep. He's not there for the benefit of the sheep. He's there to benefit from the sheep, to steal them. He's there for himself. He's there to steal. Does that sound familiar? Like the Saudi prince we just talked about. That dude didn't have a key to the palace, so he had to make a costume to pretend he did. He had to fake it. He had to lie. He had to constantly look over his shoulder to make sure he wasn't being found out until he actually ordered that pork chop. He was a wall climber. He's like the thieves who come to steal the sheep. He wanted the status of a prince without the authority of actually walking through the front door. And Jesus says the world is full of leaders just like that. And our hearts are full of the same impulses, that we want to do the exact same thing. And now contrast that to what happens when the real shepherd shows up in the morning. He walks to the door. He's calm, nothing to hide, no nervous energy, not looking over his shoulder. He just shows up at the entrance as he always does. The gatekeeper sees his face, he knows him, and he opens the door. It's simple as that. No shortcuts, no bypasses. The door is right there, the only legitimate way into the sheep. But the thief doesn't want that door, because that door means accountability. That door means the gatekeeper is going to see you. The door means you have to have a right to be there, or you don't have a right to be there. And the thief climbs the wall because he can't survive that kind of scrutiny. God's way has never been about shortcuts. God's way has never been about sneaking in. It's always going through the front door with integrity, with sacrifice, with honor, with truth, with service. And here's what that shepherd's life actually looked like, because it was not a glamorous job. Look at the sheep. Sheep are extremely dirty animals. Their wool produces this greasy wax called lanolin. So the wool, imagine being out in the wilderness with this greasy wax all over your body. It's going to pick up everything. Everything clings to it. Mud, dung, thorns, insects. I mean, the smell alone would gag a maggot. You can imagine what this was like. And so when a shepherd is spending time with his sheep all day out in the field, out in the mountainside with his flock, he's going to come home, he's going to smell just like the animals that he loved. His hands are cracked and bleeding from all the rocks, and his back's aching from carrying the ones that couldn't walk. His clothes are stained with like wool and grease and dirt. That was the job. That was his lifestyle. It was not glamorous. And he didn't do it because he was going to get some glory or honor. He did it because the sheep were his. He did it because he had those sheep. And that fake Saudi prince, he never got his hands dirty for anybody but himself. The shepherd, he got his hands dirty every single day for those sheep that were in his care. That's the difference between the thief and the shepherd. When the true shepherd enters through that gate, he didn't just shout to the whole crowd. Look what he didn't just shout to like all those sheep from all the different shepherds. Look what Jesus says. He says, to him the gatekeeper opens, the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. So think about that. These shepherds, they actually gave their sheep nicknames based on their personalities. So there'd be long ears, or white nose, or the limper. Why would you call a sheep the limper? Well, think about it. You don't call a sheep that because it's cute, but because you saw the sheep struggle and you knew it limped. You watched it get hurt on the mountainside. You watched it trying to keep up with the rest of the flock, and you saw it fail, and still you stayed and you kept an eye on. You knew the sheep and you called it by name. You stayed with that limping one. You didn't leave it behind when it slowed down. You named it after its weakness because you were there for its weakness. That's what that nickname would mean. It means I saw you at your lowest point, and I'm still here for you, limper. It wasn't just being cute. It was proof that there was a relationship there. It was proof of affection and a devotion to that sheep, even though it was broken. And in a world full of noise, with other shepherds calling, remember, all these shepherds are coming in and they're calling, so they need to know the voice of their shepherd. There's dogs barking, there's wolves howling somewhere in the distance. Those sheep, they'd have to pick out one specific voice. Not just any shepherd's voice, but their shepherd's voice. The one who knows them, the one who had been with them on the mountainside all day, the one who had moved for them and bled for them and lost sleep for them. They didn't just hear a sound, they heard someone who knew their name. When he brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow, for they know his voice. You see that? Because they knew his voice, they followed him. But then things turn in verse 5. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of the strangers. So a stranger's voice, they're not going to follow that. In fact, when they hear the stranger's voice, the sheep will tend to scatter. Doesn't matter how loud that stranger might yell, doesn't matter how confident he sounds, doesn't matter how much he looks the part. If the relationship is not there, the sheep know it. Ain't no faking it, even with these dumb sheep. Look at verse 6. This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So he's talking to the religious leaders, the super holy religious guys who knew all the rules. Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, right? They're standing right there when Jesus said all this to them, and they had no idea what he's talking about. But what is it? What is this rabbi from Nazareth? What is he talking about sheep with us for? We don't go out in the fields and deal with sheep. Well, authority that is legitimate and personal, it's an authority that doesn't need a costume, doesn't need to hide. It's a leader who enters through the front door, who knows the names and the quirks of the people he is leading, and who goes before them to find a pasture so they can actually thrive. It's not about driving sheep from behind with a whip. Get going, you little beasts. It's about leading them from the front with a voice they trust that's backed up by consistent love and care. This is the way it was always supposed to be. But he's talking to these guys for a reason. He's telling them all this for a reason, because they were getting it wrong. See, the problem is we live in a world where that design of leadership, it's been hijacked. So Jesus is looking at these Pharisees, the religious elite, who are standing there in their expensive robes and their high status positions, and he basically calls them thieves. To see why this kind of hits so hard, you have to look at the sort of the grand history of the shepherd throughout the Bible. So hundreds of years prior to this, before Jesus showed up, the prophet Ezekiel, he wrote a rather scathing indictment of the leaders of Israel in Ezekiel chapter 34. Listen how God opens this up, and I want you to really listen. So soak this in. Woe, shepherds of Israel, who've been feeding themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flock? You eat the fat and clothe yourself with the wool, but you do not feed the flock. The weak you have not strengthened, the sick you have not healed, the injured you have not bound up, the strayed you do not bring back, and the lost you have not sought, but with force and with harshness you have ruled over them. They've been scattered because there was no shepherd, and they became food for the wild beasts. On every high hill and in every valley of the country they were scattered because there was no one to search for them. Let the weight of that sink in. Woe, you false shepherds. The fat and the wool, think of that as like the benefits of leadership. And they were the perks of being in charge. And these guys were taking full advantage of that. Every single, they took the comfort, they took the status, they took the reputation and the honor from the people and the adulation, but they left their sheep broken and sick and scattered to be devoured by wolves. And then the prophet Ezekiel says on a cloudy, gloomy day, the sheep are scattered across the hill, across the valley. Picture that, this gray sky, cold ground. Sounds familiar. A little bit like Michigan. Ugh, bring on the summertime. I'm done with this cold. Somebody put it in order for warmer weather. But Ezekiel's saying, look, those sheep are out there in this cold, gray land, and there's no shepherds anywhere. Just sheep spread out alone with no one looking for them. They were spiritual predators, these leaders. They were using people to sort of line their own pockets and build their own reputations. They were feeding themselves while the people were starving. So I think if we try to bring this home a little bit, okay, I think we get this wrong a little bit ourselves in two ways. First off, the self-righteous thief. There's the self-righteous thief. This is the person who tries to climb over the wall by using their religious credentials to get in. Like the Pharisees, the super holy religious guys who knew all the rules. We think if we can just be moral enough or good enough or religious enough or do enough good stuff or come to church often enough or give enough, if we do enough of that we can earn our way into the fold. But actually, that's called theft. The guys Jesus was talking to, they didn't know it yet, but we do because we live on this side of the cross. There's only one life that was ever good enough to get into the fold, to get through that door. Only one life was righteous enough to pay the price for what we owe. And it wasn't your life. It wasn't my life. So when you try to stand before God and say, look at what I did. Look what I did. I read my Bible today. I spent 5 minutes in prayer. Look what I've given. Look how I served. When you start doing that and standing before holy God, guys, no. You're trying to steal the glory that belongs only to the one who actually died for the sheep. All of that belongs to him. It wasn't yours. It wasn't mine. You're trying to take credit for a salvation that only God can give. So we put on our costumes of righteousness to try to impress people, or worse, to try to manipulate God. Woo! That's theft, self-righteousness. You are trying to steal God's glory. The self-righteous thief. Another way we get it wrong is as the unrighteous wanderer. Maybe you aren't trying to be self-righteous. Maybe you don't tend to be more self-righteous. Maybe you tend to be a little more unrighteous. And maybe you're not trying to climb over the wall. You're just lying in a ditch. You've been scattered. You've been torn apart by this world. You've been hurt by false shepherds, maybe by a boss or a parent or even a church leader. Maybe it's someone who used you instead of helping you. Sheep are naturally extremely dirty and defenseless. So that's a reality for most of us. So there's a good chance you've been beaten up by this world. There's a good chance you've been beaten up by either your sin or the sins of others. That's a reality. So think about what sheep actually look like when they're out in the wild. They don't look all clean and fluffy like you see on the greeting cards. They look like something that got dragged through a ditch. All that lanolin in their wool, it's going to pick up everything. The mud first, then the thorns, and then more mud, more thorns, and then more thorns on top of that. It starts to mat together until it gets so heavy, it's so tangled that the sheep can barely carry the weight. It's not just dirty, but it's weighing them down. It's heavy. They're trapped in their own filth. And on a cloudy, gloomy day when the sky's gray and the ground is wet and the cold is starting to set in, a sheep out there alone without a shepherd just looks like something that's been forgotten, something that's been left behind, something nobody is going to come for. A lot of you feel that way. You feel like you've been covered in that lanolin of your own mistakes, and you've been food for all the beasts of the wild because you didn't have anyone to search for you. You feel invisible. You feel abandoned. Whether you're the guy trying to rob God by being a good person, or you're the person who's been robbed of hope by this cruel world, either one, we've all rejected the only door that leads to life. We've looked for abundant life in the things that this world has to offer. Money, sex, booze, power, politics, I don't know, religion. We've all found that all those things are really thieves. They only ultimately steal and kill and destroy. They don't bring joy that lasts. And they're really good at stealing and killing and destroying. And a lot of you come into this place carrying the weight of all that brokenness. Where every human leader failed us, we see Jesus, the Good Shepherd, step into the story where he fulfills what was a 600-year-old prophecy, a promise. In Ezekiel 34:11, God told Israel, "Behold, I myself will search for my sheep I will seek them out. And then Jesus steps back in front of these Pharisees and he says, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. Jesus is saying the search is over. The God who promised to come and shepherd you is standing right here before you. Jesus gets it right. I believe in a few ways that the thieves of this world never can. First, he has legitimate entry. He's the one who can open that door and pass through it. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. Jesus didn't just claim authority, he embodied it. He spoke with an authority. People said, who is this guy? Why does he speak with a power? He's just some rabbi from a dinky little town in the middle of nowhere. But he speaks with power. He embodied it. Think about the difference between a man who breaks into the house and the man who actually has the deed to the house and the keys. The burglar has to wait for the cover of night. He has to find a weak spot, break a window, sneak in. The owner pulls in the driveway in broad daylight, has a key, opens the door. He doesn't need to disguise his face in order to get in. Jesus is saying, I didn't have to trick the gatekeeper. He didn't come to earth as some sort of divine identity thief. He was explicit. He came through the door of prophecy, fulfilling 300 specific details written century before he was born. He came through the front door, through the law, living the only life that never once climbed over the wall and snuck in. The only life ever that met God's standard for purity and obedience. So he came with authority. He came through the door of prophecy. He came through the door of the law. And when he stands at the door, he isn't asking for permission to be the shepherd. He's given the keys. He's the one with the authority. The thieves who came before him, the false messiahs, the corrupt kings, the hired hand, the priests and the religious leaders, they all used a shortcut. They used force. They used fear. They used costumes. Just like our Saudi prince, but Jesus, he just uses truth. He's the only one who can walk through that front door of the sheepfold and have the gatekeeper say, oh yeah, I've been expecting you. Jesus says, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. Jesus isn't a thief climbing over the back wall of your life, trying to sneak into your life. He's the only authorized access point that any of us have to God. He doesn't need a fake Saudi prince costume because he is the rightful king of the entire universe, because he is the maker of heaven and earth. He made everything with just his voice. He crafted you from the dust of the earth. He breathed his breath into your lungs. He is the rightful king. He is the creator God. He entered the world through the door of prophecy, through the door of obedience to the law, and the door of the Father's appointment. When he stands at the door and he knocks, it's not like Mr. Rogers on the other side of the door, all polite, waiting for you to open. This is the Lion of Judah. He wants in, he's coming in. Ain't no need to sneak over a fence when you're Jesus. Another way he gets it right is through an intimate knowledge. Remember, what does a thief do? The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But the good shepherd, Jesus, says, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Do you see the contrast that Jesus is drawing here? Everything that is not him, the things that promised you life, they only take and steal and kill. Now watch what Jesus says next. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees a wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. he flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. A hired hand's going to run every time because the sheep aren't his. So he does a little math in that moment. The wolf shows up, he sees those teeth, and the hired hand looks at the sheep, just one sheep, and he does the math. Okay, is that one filthy sheep worth my life? The answer is always going to be no. Not what he's thinking. I hate my sheep. It's not what he's thinking. He's just doing the math and says, okay, my life is not worth the life of that sheep. I'm outie. I'm gone. In this world, that's how you are measured. You're measured by what you can produce. Your worth is measured by what you cost. Think of it. Anybody you have insurance and you have to get surgery and you have to wait for the insurance company to tell you how much they're going to pay, you do realize there is some actuary in some office who's calculating what your life is worth based on some table and your age and your weight and your race and your zip code. In this world, that's how you are measured. And when the wolf comes and the price gets high enough, everyone who's a hired hand, everyone who's hired walks away. When the cost is too high, they are going to run for the hills. The boss walks away when you're not profitable anymore. The friend walks away when you get too hard to be around. The system's going to walk away when you stop being useful. That is a cruelty some of you know too well. That's just how hired hands think. They were never in it for the sheep's well-being. They were in it for the job. They were in it for the bottom line. And the moment the job costs more than it pays, they say, I'm out. Peace out, y'all. I'm gone. But Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. As I was kind of putting this together, I couldn't help but see the echoes of what is probably one of your favorite Psalms, Psalm 23. Specifically verse 4. Let's talk about a good shepherd in that psalm. It says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And this is the line that I'm focusing in on here. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So the shepherd would have a rod and a staff, and he's not talking about being whacked with it. When a shepherd brought his flock back into the fold at the end of the day, he would hold the rod across the entrance, kind of like a turnstile, because they just want to rush in because they're sheep. That's what they do. And the sheep would sort of pass under it one by one at a time, not as a group, not as a crowd, just one at a time. And as each sheep would come in and duck under the rod, the shepherd would lift the wool and look, inspecting the sheep, not just glancing. He was patting the wool with his hands. He was pulling it back from the skin, looking for what was underneath it, looking at the skin itself, at the flesh of the sheep, because that's where the damage usually was. You can't see a wound from the outside. You have to get in close. The wool covers it. Dirt covers the wool. From 10 feet away, every sheep looks the same. It's just this walking, fluffy ball of filth. But when the shepherd puts his hands in and he parts the wool, when he really sees it, the wound, the gash, the infection, the place where the thorns went in really deep. When he held out that rod as he entered back into the fold, he was checking for wounds. He was checking for parasites. He was checking for nicks and scratches that might have happened. He wasn't just counting them to make sure that they were all there. He was inspecting them. He was looking at the condition of each one. He knew which sheep had been limping since Tuesday. He knew which one had gotten into the thorns over near the creek. He knew which one was losing weight because something was wrong that hadn't shown up yet. And so he got in close. And he inspected them. And he looked at the ugly parts. He says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own. Jesus says, I know you. I know your wounds. I know where the thorns have torn your skin. I know where your soul is aching. I know you. He says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. That's what a good shepherd does. He knows the wounds of your life. He doesn't get tricked by the costumes and the masks we wear. He doesn't just see the wool that's grown over the places of hurt. He parts it. He looks at the skin. He sees the lanolin and the dirt, but he still sticks with us. He's not grossed out by how stinky and nasty our sins smell. He knows the places where, the craggy parts of the mountain tore our flesh. He sees the fear in our gut when we check our bank account. He sees the shame we carry from that divorce. He sees the anger that flares up every time our dad's name gets mentioned. Oh, that wicked man. We see the exhaustion that we have. He sees it, of us trying to hold our lives together while our kids end up using again, while the world seems to be falling down around us, while the government is failing and people are dying and the rage is everywhere and we're consumed with fear. He sees that. He sees how we are consumed with fear and anger by this world that is broken by sin. And a bad shepherd would see a broken sheep and he'd let it remain in that state of brokenness. Or he'd let the thieves take it. Or maybe a bad shepherd would just say, hey, wolves, come on, this one's weak. I don't need it. It's got a limp. We'll let the wolves take that one. Maybe a bad shepherd would help out a little bit, but he's fixing it up because it's a project and not something he loves. But a good shepherd, he doesn't look at you and see a project to fix. He looks at you and he sees his own sheep. Because there's a true intimacy there. And listen to what that intimacy is rooted in with verse 15. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. This isn't a shepherd who knows you from a distance. This is a shepherd whose knowledge of you is the same kind as the knowledge of the Father and the Son. That's how deep it goes. That's how deep he knows you. As much as God the Son, Jesus Christ, knows God the Father, as close as they are, that's how he knows you. There's no hiding. Another way Jesus gets it right is through substitutionary sacrifice. Look at verse 10 again. It says, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Jesus says he came that we may have life and have it abundantly. We might hear the word abundantly and think, oh, good. That means I finally get that 50-inch TV I've been waiting for. We think it means things going well in our life. Oh, I want the abundant life where there's nothing broken and everything's going great. It's not what Jesus means. Abundant life isn't a life of luxury. Think about it this way. I know this guy, I'm going to call him Boba Fett. Because I'm a Star Wars nerd, I don't get many opportunities to name people, and I have a microphone, so what are you going to do about it? Okay, so my buddy Boba Fett, by every worldly measure, he should be miserable. He's divorced, he's alone, he works a job that barely pays the bills. He's not important in the eyes of society, he's not an influencer, and yet he's one of the happiest people I know. Because he figured out that what most people never seem to figure out is that Jesus is enough. That he is good and great and glorious and gracious, and that truth has consumed his life. And he doesn't need his circumstances to cooperate. He doesn't need that, the glory and the honor and the wealth and the influence, because he has Jesus. Because he's experienced life abundant. And when you finally experience the good shepherd, even when everything around you is falling apart, you're going to see you have someone who knows your name, who doesn't leave you when he sees the stink and the filth of the mess that you've made. No matter what the mountainside looks like, he's going to chase you down. Now the wolf, make no mistake, the wolf is real. There are wolves out in the world. The wolf is that layoff notice that shows up the same week your transmission went out. The wolf's the biopsy that came with those words that you can't seem to unhear. The wolf is the addiction that keeps circling back no matter how many times you tried to quit. The wolf is the loneliness that howls at you at 2 a.m. when everyone else is asleep. The wolf is the guilt and the shame and the fear that you're not enough and you're never going to be good enough. The wolf is death itself. The wolf is judgment. The wolf is everything that has authority to end you. The hired hand, the boss, the therapist, the self-help guru, even the well-meaning friends, they're all going to run when that wolf shows up. They can't truly help you. And most won't help you at all, and you know that. Because it's not their job to die for you. But look at Jesus. He says, I lay down my life for my sheep. Jesus didn't run. He steps between you and the wolf. He takes the teeth. He took the claws. He took the judgment that you earned and the death that you deserve. And here's what makes this different from every other story that you've heard about sacrifice. Look at verse 18. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down. And I have authority to take it back up. This charge I've received from my Father. Jesus saying, nobody forced me to do this. I chose it. I had the authority to lay down my own life. He had the authority to lay down his own life, and he chose that. When the wolves came, he stepped in and said, devour me instead of them. And then it says he has the authority to pick his life back up. He laid down his own life, and then he raised himself back up. Did he raise his life back up from the dead to go live a cozy life over in Galilee in some nice cottage by the sea? No, he chose to lay down his life, not so that he could gain glory, but that he could gain a bunch of smelly sheep. Wandering sheep. For sheep covered in dirt and lanolin and the filth of our own mess. He also laid down his life for thieves. The ones who sneak over the side of the fence to get the sheep. Think about the contrast between Jesus and this fake Saudi prince. The Saudi prince, this Anthony cat, he didn't choose to get caught. He got caught because he ate a pork chop. Somebody figured him out. The whole thing fell apart because he slipped up. He didn't hand himself over. He was exposed. The good shepherd, Jesus, no, complete opposite of that. Nobody exposed him. Nobody cornered him. He walked straight into it. He gave himself up voluntarily, deliberately, on purpose. That is not what a fraud does. That's what a good shepherd does. And here's why, the fact that he picked his life back up, why that matters so much. Think about what happens when the wolf kills the shepherd. If the shepherd dies, he's gone. What happens to the sheep? Well, they're next. There's no protecting the sheep anymore. The wolf's already won. A dead shepherd is useless to the flock. That's the whole problem with every other human leader who has ever tried to protect the people in his care. They can only go so far. You only got so many years in this life. Eventually, the mightiest and the strongest leaders of this world will stop breathing and assume room temperature. And when they do, the sheep are on their own. But Jesus didn't stay dead, did he? He takes his life back up. And that means the wolf, the death, the judgment, everything that has authority to end you, it's lost. It's lost its teeth. It took its best shot at Jesus, and it didn't finish the job because the shepherd came back to life. And he chose this. He chose you. He gets it right because he's the only shepherd who ever became a lamb to be slaughtered on behalf of his own flock and walked back out the other side. So how do we respond to a shepherd like this? I'd say first, let's listen to his voice. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. Now, guys, this is a massive statement. This is a massive statement. This is a man speaking 2,000 years ago, but he was talking about looking through the centuries, across oceans, across continents, and he's looking directly at you. The other sheep he's talking about that aren't in his fold yet, he's talking about you today in this room. He's looking directly at you. Whether you're the thief or you're the wanderer, he is calling you into a single flock, his church. That ought to blow our mind. He was talking about you 2,000 years ago. And I want to say something directly to you. If you are in this room and you feel like the outsider, you feel like you don't belong, you feel like you never really belonged anywhere, maybe you think you've gone too far, or you're too filthy, or you're too dirty, or too broken, listen to what Jesus did not do. He didn't say, I might bring them into my fold. He didn't say, if they want to come into my fold. He said, I must. That's not hope. That's not a maybe. Jesus saying he's going to find you and he's going to bring you in. You are not an afterthought. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. The reason the Father loves them is because of what he's willing to do for you. The world has plenty of other voices, but his voice, the Good Shepherd, he laid down his life for you. He laid down his life for you, the sheep. So any other voice, are they volunteering for that job? No way. You know better than that. So listen. Listen to when he calls. But don't be surprised if his voice divides the room, because there was again a division among the Jews because of these words. That's what's going to happen when Jesus speaks. People got to choose. You can't stay neutral when it comes to Jesus. Listen to the world and you're going to get it wrong. You're going to get a wrong version of him. Listen to what I mean by verse 20. Many of them said, oh, he's got a demon and he's insane. Why listen to him? I mean, and honestly, think about why they said that. It does sound crazy, doesn't it? Jesus standing there basically saying, look, I'm going to die and then I'm not going to be dead. That does sound crazy, because nobody comes back from the dead. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, it sounds insane. He's going to lay down his life and pick it back up again? No. That doesn't sound like courage. That sounds like madness. Others said, these are not the words of one who is oppressed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Wow, that's two very different responses, aren't they? Same crowd, same words, same Jesus. One side hears him, it says, oh, he's out of his mind. The other side says, no, we saw this guy who was blind and he just gave him sight. Demons don't do that. So here's a question for us in this room. Which voices in this world are you listening to? Are you listening to the voice that says, yeah, just Jesus stuff, it's all a bunch of garbage. Look what his people do. Look how terrible his people are. It's easy to hear that voice. Are you listening to the voice that says you really ought to be angry and nasty and fearful right now because this world's jacked up? That voice is the algorithm. That voice is the outrage machine. That is the enemy telling you to be fearful and to look at your fellow human as an enemy. Is that the voice you hear? Or the one that looks at you through the centuries and is talking about you, saying, there are sheep there that I love, and I'm willing to lay down my life for them. That's a voice we need to listen to. But you can't listen to both. You're gonna have to land on one side or the other. You can listen to the voices that seek to steal and destroy, or the voice that comes to give you life abundant. We got to enter through the door, guys. Jesus says, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. So take off the costume, quit pretending, stop hiding, walk through the door. Are you still trying to get some extra credit for your super holy life? Quit, okay? Quit thinking, look what I did, God. Does that make you happy with me? Because you're trying to steal the glory that belongs only to the one who actually laid down his life for his sheep. You're trying to take credit for the salvation that only God can give. Trust Jesus, that his life was good enough. His sacrificial life, his sacrificial death was enough for you. Enter through the door and come home. And I'd say finally follow. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him. Following Jesus, guys, is not about perfectly navigating the rough mountainside of life. It's about staying close enough to the shepherd that you can hear him when you drift. Oh, how we drift. All those voices we listen to, which voice are you listening to? If you've listened to other voices in this world, well, then you need to know that he meets us right where you are. dirt, stink, manure, and all. He meets us right where we are, and he loves us too much to leave us there, and he invites us to follow him. Follow the narrow path that he leads us on. Stumbling towards him together as a church. And why do we want to stumble toward him? Because that's where life is. Where he is life abundant, and we want to be with him, so we follow him because we love him. So if you're hurting today, if you've been robbed by life or you've been scattered because of your own choices, look at this good shepherd. He's not running away from the wolves. He's running after you. He's chasing you down. He's not wearing a costume. He has scars to prove he is the real deal. He's standing at the door. He's calling your name. He is calling you by name, my friends. Are you listening? Let's pray. God, we thank you. You didn't leave us scattered on some cloudy, gloomy day. God, we confess, we often look like that fake Saudi prince from Colombia. We're like the thieves trying to scramble over that wall. We wear costumes, trying to dress ourselves up as being good and holy, trying to earn a place in the fold that only Jesus has a right to give. Lord, we thank you for our good shepherd. We thank you that you chased us down. Jesus, you got your hands dirty. You took on our smell, our mess, all that, the lanolin and the dirt and the dung. You were willing to get your hands dirty when death and judgment showed up with its teeth baring and its claws there. Jesus didn't do the math of a hired hand and say, this group of people, they're a train wreck. They're not worth my life. No, instead, he did the math and he laid down his life so that we could have life abundant. So as we go out from this place, God, help us to be a people who listen for your voice. In a world with thousands of screaming voices, let the voice of the one who knows our name be the loudest thing we hear. Help us enter through the door. If there's anyone here still trying to climb over that wall of self-righteousness, would you help them take off that costume today, God? Give them the courage to stop hiding and start trusting in the finished work of Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And finally, Lord, help us follow that narrow path of Jesus. Even when the mountainside's steep, even when the valley is dark, remind us that the shepherd has already gone before us. He hit all the briars first. He cleared the path. He fought the wolves. We don't follow a dead leader. We follow a risen shepherd who knows our name. May your goodness and mercy follow us all the days of our lives until we dwell in your house forever and ever. It's in the name of the Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ, that we pray.